Welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. Today we're going to learn by doing the impossible with Brian Livingston. Our purpose is to help entrepreneurs succeed, and we do this by inviting great business leaders to share their stories. To learn, to be sure not to miss an episode, I ask you to go to paparelli.com and submit your email, and you'll be notified every week as to the interview that's coming out. And as a bonus, you'll also get my weekly Tuesday morning blog, specifically for entrepreneurs. My guest today, as I said, is Brian Livingston. Brian is an author and criminal and civil litigator living in Charleston, South Carolina. I just realized, I found today talking to him that he is a former criminal and civil litigator, as he's now moving to be a full-time author. Full-time writer. He is also a state wrestling champion. He has successfully hiked the Appalachian Trail from beginning to end. He just published his first novel, which I really enjoyed, called The Habits of Squirrels. And I know it comes up backwards, but it is on Amazon and other great sites that you can get it, and I recommend it. And Brian is a close friend of my son, David Paparelli. So I've known Brian basically for his whole life. I don't know Brian much at all about his adult part of his whole life. So this is going to be interesting. But I've noticed with Brian, observed with Brian, he has all the successful traits of a successful entrepreneur. And that's why I invite him to share his life with you, my entrepreneur audience. So welcome, Brian, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Paparelli. Thank you for not calling me Mustang.
Oh, yeah. Well, you might have to tell people what that means.
It's been a long time. I think that was my third
you still
grade
remember
class.
That story?
I think so. It
Okay,
was a turning point for me. My third grade class was, I think, Miss Mande's Mustangs, and I came over one day wearing a T-shirt that said Mustang on it. And that stuck for, I guess probably 25 years now.
I guess every time that I saw you, I don't think of you that way anymore. I don't like when you were a kid walking into my house. But yeah, I did call you Mustang for a long time. I don't know. Maybe it just fit. All right. But tell me, what's your, you just surprised me here. I thought you were doing criminal and civil litigation. You're a lawyer.
Yep.
And you told me, I forgot to tell you, something new happened in that area. What happened?
So, about a month ago, I guess maybe 6 weeks ago, I tendered my resignation. And, but in my 2 weeks, worked for 2 weeks. And, since then, focusing on book promotion. And then my wife and I just bought a house that needed a little bit of work. So everything you see behind me, I've painted. So it's been
a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was not without its conniptions and hissy fits, but we got there in these rooms.
But you've been, let's go back to the legal for a while, your law career, if you will. How long ago has it been since you graduated from law school and got your first job as a lawyer?
I graduated from Washington and Lee University School of Law May of 2016, started working as a prosecutor. They're called solicitors in South Carolina. That September, worked there for 2.5 years, and then started with a large insurance defense firm up in Greenville. Worked there for 2 years, and then I just worked for my most recent small firm down here in Charleston for a year, ending in May.
So you graduated again. Tell me the year. I blanked for a second.
2016.
16. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you've been a lawyer basically for 5.5 years.
Yes, sir. Pretty much.
Okay. So making a decision, it's difficult enough for us when we go through our 20s and early 30s to establish ourselves in a career. I always say one of the first jobs that we have to do after we're 21 is establish our value to society. All right. Well, you chose to go to law school. I'm not sure why. Was there a good reason?
I had a mind.
I think it came out of Clemson, right?
Yes.
I always got to put it. I got to put in a plug for Clemson. I got too many people that are friends from Clemson.
Well, they're probably good people. I had a mind to be an environmental attorney. And so I went to law school thinking that that would be my path. You get towards the end of law school and you start realizing there's not a lot of environmental jobs. And then I don't know, I found out about the prosecutor position through a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and I applied for it because at some point you have to start, paying down loans and contributing and making
Right.
money. So I took that, and I enjoyed that. That was in very rural South Carolina, northern South Carolina. I enjoyed that. I
Interesting
did
that
that.
you tell me you enjoyed it. I think when we talked one time, very briefly, is you
Yeah.
told me that it was just a lot of indigents and a lot of drug cases, broken
Yes.
families, and all that. What was the enjoyment in all that?
Well, enjoyment's probably not the best word. It was easy to understand why I was getting out of bed each morning to do what I was doing, and it was easy to engage in the work because it's an odd angle from the prosecutor standpoint, but you are trying to help people and sort of better society in a way. So it's very clear what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I think
I
that's
took
important for us in life is that we have to be clear on the problem that we solve, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I remember that conversation with you, and I think I was taking that aspect of it for granted,
Huh.
because moving on to civil litigation, it's not going to bash the entire industry, but aspects of it, you just sort of feel like the hamster on the wheel, and it kind of started to feel similar. The work started to feel similar to just homework in high school, where it just kept coming day by day.
So it wasn't really solving a problem. It turned into just procedural and process.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
At least for me.
And what did that do to you? Like you said, it was like homework in high school. How did that affect you? Because you're at a point, one of the things that starts happening, and I'm sure it happened to you, you were making probably nothing as a solicitor in South Carolina, and then you go and you finally get into this job. I'm sure you're making pretty good money. So now you've got what we call in the post-entrepreneur, post-exit world in entrepreneurism, we call it golden handcuffs. So you start living to this new level of income. And you were there, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For me, it took me a long time on this earth to figure this out and to actually do something about it. It's either sort of engagement or death. Just finding something that is stimulating and interesting and that I enjoy. And then you hit that wall, like you said, sort of getting into a job where you're not engaged, but it does check a lot of other boxes, more practical boxes, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I guess you'd call it a catch-22 or just one of those conundrums of just.
Well, what happens to you? So what happens to you? I like that, what you said. I have to either be engaged or it's just, you called it, or death. It's probably, or I'll put an adjective before it, a slow death, right?
Yes.
It's just like life is taking a piece of you at a time, which happened to me in the 80s, when I was in corporate. I was like, this is not where I need to be. But I was sitting there with a wife and 3 kids at the time saying, I guess I got to keep doing this, there must be something wrong with me. Everybody around me seems to be pretty happy, which I'm sure was true with you.
I had that thought just about every day. I mean, everybody, the people I was working with weren't bad people. They seemed happy going about their day. So
yeah.
What am I missing?
So what does that death look? So what does that death look to you? What were you struggling with as you were doing this? Like, tell me what you were feeling and how you dealt with that. Because there's a lot of people in that position. They're in careers that are just absolutely a mismatch for them, but they're making money and they do have responsibility. Like you said, the practical side is satisfying. So how did you tell me about what you went through?
Real bad moods, real bad moodiness where you get home from the day and you feel like, you've been sort of ground down to your core with just, moving papers from the left side of the desk to the right. Okay. And in terms of dealing with it, I wrote hard for those years in civil litigation. Wake up in the morning and right before work, right after work. And then, other little side projects. I ran a marathon at some point during that. Well, that might have been during prosecution days. But just anything to give the idea of progress, that I was working towards a goal that I was happy to be working towards.
How about if there's somebody that's sort of in this stage in their life, but they're not quite sure, and they're your age? How old are you now?
32.
32 years old. They're right. So this isn't something that showed up when you were 32. This is something that showed up when you were 28. Okay.
Yeah.
It started working on you. So how would you say, well, how do I know I'm in that same position, Brian, that you are in? And I'm working towards what decision you made, which is to leave the profession, okay, at this time. What's it like to what did you experience when you woke up in the morning, and what was happening to you during the day? You told me what happens at night, but what happened when you woke up in the morning? I want to know if I feel that way too, right? That's what I'm asking.
Start just checking off the tasks and sort of dreading the tasks. Each day would have a different set of the list of things that I'll have to do, and just, being sort of angsty teenager about it, but just think, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do this. And then after that, I have to deal with this. And then all this has to be done today because the deadline's in 2 days and I have to deal with something else tomorrow. So I'm just laying in bed thinking about that. It makes just that morning pot of coffee and that breakfast just a dreary ordeal.
So basically your thoughts about your life or your day turn into, I have to muster up the discipline to do what needs to be done, but I'm not doing anything about what I want, but I'm not doing any of what I want to do.
Yes. And then it really came to a head when it came time to start doing stuff like this and start promoting my book. And it's like, where am I going to fit this thing that I actually care about into the crevices of this day? And do I want, my passion project to suffer that much from a job that I'm not that interested in? It was agony for a while.
Well, how did you get to the point then? Because it's a really hard point to get to.
Yes.
To write that letter of resignation. Okay. Tell me how you got to that point.
Inch by inch.
Not the inch by inch piece, but I'm talking about the final, because I know every morning you're laying in bed going, what the hell am I doing? Right. So when do you finally go, that's it? That's what I'm asking.
So without giving out too much, actual specific detail, I'm not trying to make any specific people look bad. Just I sat in a 2-hour meeting.
Look bad. You should be the one that looks bad in this thing. Why would someone else look bad?
That's fair. I sat in about a 2.5 hour meeting over a very dreary, boring, mundane case.
Okay.
About some warped floors in a house that I think totaled less than 1/4 of an inch. And we had a 2-hour meeting about it. We talked about how much money was going to get spent on it. We talked about the plan for it. And it was already a particularly rough day. There were other, since it was recent, there was book stuff going on. I had some family issues going on, and I was like, I came up with about halfway through the meeting. I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. So I sat there. I tried to it was virtual, so I tried to be a friendly bobbing head for about another hour and a half. And then afterwards, my boss and we called to do a recap call, and I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Okay. When you got off that call with your boss, how did you feel?
It was a lot of emotions. There was definitely that nervous aspect of, I've just quit something that I've invested a lot in, and I don't have any sort of parachute. I mean, I'm not gonna starve. I'm not gonna lose my home because my wife's an attorney as well. But we had sort of prepared for a switch. But there was, what will become of me? Where does it go from here? What happens to Brian Livingston? And then you sort of have that thought, it's like, man, that was pretty awesome. And, so when your wife gets home that day, is that the first that she heard?
Did she know this was coming? Did you have any discussions, or is this Mustang being deathly quiet? And all of a sudden she walks in and pow, she gets hit with, by the way, I'm unemployed because I don't want to do that anymore.
I had her permission.
Oh, you did?
We had discussed in detail. We had set down a specific date, but I talked about her, and we had sort of discussed that day that we're really into approaching the end of the rope. But we hadn't set down, such and such a date at such and such a time, Brian Livingston is going to quit his job. And just when that final snip came, I got pushed too far.
Pushed too far by being in another boring meeting on a problem that you could care less about, and you don't understand why anybody cares about it either, right?
Yeah, and just you've known me for a while. I am pretty quiet. I'm pretty non-combative. A lot of attorneys take some enjoyment from that competitive process of going through the litigation, sort of no matter the factual basis. And that's just not me. So
there's the other piece of this, though, is that I remember when I quit, I always say, I don't know if I quit or I was fired, from my big job that I had that set me on my career at 39, to something else. So I'm not as smart as you, so I was a little later than you. But I remember when I left there, I remember walking out of the Galleria and I went, oh my God, it's so good. I can breathe again. This is so wonderful. And then my second thought was immediately, what did you just do? Now where do you go? Because I didn't have anything planned either. I didn't know where to go at that point. So I know exactly how you're feeling. So then, but there were some other piece to you that you had you had a comparison, and that was your writing.
Yes.
Right. So there was this, when you thought about your writing when you were laying in bed, how did that compare? Well, you already told me how you thought about your legal work, your career. How did this writing, how did you think about that?
I think this will be the first time I'll publicly call myself an author, but every author has like a love-hate relationship with their writing. There's the nights, because when I was working, I'd wake up early and start writing, 5 or 5:30 and do it a couple hours before work. The night before that, I'm laying in bed. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to get up and do that. I put words to the page, form sentences, figure out what these characters are going to do. I have no business doing that. And I have no interest in it. And then the majority of the nights, I would already have like an idea. I was like, oh, that'd be an interesting thing for him to say, or that'd be an interesting thing for him to explore. I'm excited to do that. And my wife got really frustrated with this, but because I was in bed, I'll just sit there and text her all my ideas just to have them written down in some sort of recorded form. Those nights, the happy nights, the excited nights, were much more frequent, and especially the deeper you get into the novel and the deeper you get into your world and you understand your characters, the more those kind of nights come to you. And then you wake up in the morning, all right, I know exactly, I can picture the line that I'm going to start on, and I can see where I'm going to take it.
I love that. That's so, and the hardest writing is I have no inspiration, sit in front of a blank page. That's the hardest writing, but that's also being an author, and I've dealt with that. But the easiest writing is the inspirational writing. Oh, I got this idea, right? And you can't wait to get to the computer to start writing. So I know what you're talking about, but what you're telling me is there was more and more of those days, the more and more you wrote.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's books and books on this, about going out and meeting the muse, not waiting for the muse to come to you. You got to do the legwork and then, wander through the woods, perhaps alone for a while before you find the muse who, will take you by the hand and, lead you where you want to go, or where, the story should go.
So all of those inspirational times when you're in bed, or when you're writing those quick texts, to capture something, right? That's an idea that that you can then set off and start writing about. That's what you were comparing to every day thinking about going to work.
Yes.
And you compare those two and you go, that makes work even uglier, right? Because you now have this comparison. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was what difficult for me because I didn't have this offset comparison. So I thought I was the oddball at work because everybody else seemed to be pretty happy at what they were doing.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
a lonely place to be.
Right. It's the only place to be versus what you had, which was, oh no, I have this little happy place, which is being in the middle of the story that I'm living now and writing about, which is really exciting. So when did you decide? So I'm very proud of you, by the way. And I'm humbled that you would say, this is the first time I called myself an author. But you know what? You are an author. And part of becoming an author is admitting that that is, in fact, what you are. So I'm humbled by that. I'm the first to actually hear that with your downward voice inflection, that this is what I do. That's fantastic. So thanks for honoring me with that.
That felt good to say. I'll probably say it again.
Yeah, well, you're going to be saying it a lot, I think. So but tell me how, while you're an attorney, you decide I'm going to write a book. When did you decide to write it?
So
you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it's another thing that sort of process. I've always had the idea to write something ever since I think, one of my maybe fourth grade teachers said they liked something I wrote. And I took that little moment of vanity, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'm going to be an author. And then,
Wait a second. You said that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then for 15, maybe 20 years, did nothing in that vein. Maybe a couple, creative writing courses in high school. And then, I
just want to interrupt you for a second, I wrote a blog recently of that God speaks to us very early in our life. And he tells us what he wants us to do, like what the purpose he created Brian or Charlie. And we might not know it at the time, but it's sort of in our subconscious, and it leads us through life and all of the decisions we make until we get there. Yeah. So fourth grade, 10 years old, you said, I'm going to be that. I'm going to be an author.
Yep.
I love that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I had to need to.
And then, as we discussed, got pretty heavily off track in terms of professional career. But then, after college, I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail. You do something like that. Probably the most exciting thing I've done. That you start combining that with sort of your dreams. Like, well, if I was going to write a book, it might as well be about hiking and this big adventure that I've had. Mm-hmm. And then, sat on that for 4 years until I was out of law school. And, when I was a prosecutor, that's very much a 9-to-5 job. You have a little more free time. I was living alone with my dog in the mountains of South Carolina, and just had the time and had the freedom. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start writing. And you take those sputter starts because it's.
Did you do it? Do you remember that day you did it? Because you talked about doing it for, like you said, 4 or 5 years, and now that time came. How did you get to, just like the time that it came to quit the job? You told me where you were sitting in the meeting. Tell me about the time that you decided this is it.
It was January of 2018. I think I would get off work and I would go and take a little hike with my dog. And on one specific day, I was like, okay, when I get back, before I cook dinner, before I do anything, I'm going to write. I'm going to write 1,000 words.
Okay.
And so on that day, I did it. Those 1,000 words were useless, but the next day I was able to come back and we talked about the blank screen. I had not a blank screen. It's much easier to correct something that's broken in the writing world. This is pretty specific, I think, to writing. To fix something that's broken than to start anew and look at that blank page. So, and then that sort of snowballed into a story that I didn't end up using. And then I went back and maybe in March or May of that year and really started on the journey of retired mailman Gabriel Jenkins.
Okay. So then did you then write every day after your hike?
Yeah, I got onto a pretty good routine for a long time. That wake up in the morning and write, and then right before I went to bed. Um,
How many words a day were you writing? Did you have a goal?
I think I took this from Stephen King. He said he writes 2,000 a day, but he'll be okay with you only writing 1,000. So I shot for about 1,500. Which seemed fair. He wasn't trying to be an attorney during the meat of the day when he was writing, so I thought 1,500 seemed fair. I didn't beat myself up if I didn't make that. It's just you got to put a number out there so you have something to work towards.
And just for me, this would help me. And you were 7 days a week
writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The schedule will be a little different on weekends, but try and find 2 to 4 hours during the day, whether that's consecutive or you break it up. Just you risk losing the muse if you step away from it too long. So yeah, it's definitely trying to keep it at least 6 days a week, and then 7 days really is what you need to be doing.
Did you have those days where you sat there and the muse was asleep or on vacation?
Oh, it's a brutal process. There's those fun moments like we talked about where you have inspiration, and
those are the easy ones. Tell me the tough ones.
Yeah. The tough ones are where your character he's physically at location A and he's mentally at location A, and then you know that he needs to be physically at location D, and just like, how do I? And then in between it's just the void, and there's how do I navigate this darkness to get him from here to there? And so just kind of working through the mechanics of breaking it down, and it becomes much less of a creative process and almost sort of like engineering your story. It's like, okay, well, if he's going to get here, it makes sense for him to go here first, to think about it this way, to have this moment, have this interaction. The fallout from that is such and such, and then that will leave him at where I want him to be and where
Tell me a story. Tell me a story where that actually happened with old Gabe.
Okay. The tunnel, when he goes through the train tunnel with Bear.
Okay.
That was a situation where I needed him, or I wanted him to kind of fall in with that group of boys, and I wanted him to show some progress in terms of being adventurous and going into the tunnel. I'm not sure at the beginning of the story that Gabe would have gone into the tunnel, but I needed him to still need help, and I needed that help to come from one of the lads, is what I call them, that trio of boys. And so that was first I had him falling through a river, and if people fall in a river, there are consequences. I didn't want to deal with consequences. If you sort of stumble in a tunnel, you might be all right. And so it checked all the boxes. It was just a really tedious process getting to there. That's one of those seeds that I really struggled with.
Would that be a 7 day sort of tedious process, or?
Yeah. And it'd also be I'm going to move on, I'm going to come back to it at some point process.
And you do that when you're writing.
Yeah.
So you can drop something for a while and let it just kind of cook for a little bit, your subconscious.
Yeah.
Okay. But you never give up on writing that day.
Sure.
Okay. Well, that's inspiring for me. I really appreciate that. When did the Habits of Squirrels sort of become a potential reality? I think that when you're on this like AT hike, there's like, yeah, I know I'm going to finish it. And then you're kind of not sure, but there's some point where you go, no, I know I'm going to finish this. Right. Right. So when did that happen in the book?
That's a tough question.
Well, did you never have that decision? You always knew it was going to happen.
I just I was plodding along, and then in that first draft, I sent out the first draft of the book to my parents and my sisters in January of 2020, and it was essentially everything but a good ending at that point. So that's when that's the first I told anyone except for my wife about the book. And then I heard back from them, got some notes, and then I went back and got it professionally edited later that year. Yeah, I mean, I think when I sent that out, that was the first real thought that I was like, okay, this is a thing that, is worth seeing through. This isn't just, a little hobby that I have. It's not just, rebuilding a Corvette or something in the garage. This is something that could actually.
I think especially when you share it with somebody else. And then you, like you said, you took that step to go to a professional editor,
Yes.
Because that's humbling.
Yes. It's a very rewarding process because, he was the first time, like just the back and forth of like him having an idea of like, well, I see what you're trying to do here. Maybe it'd be better if you would do it this way.
Yeah.
And then I got lucky. He was very receptive. It's like, well, what if we did it this way? Because what I'm really trying to do here also ties into this later. And it was a really fun back and forth to discuss about something, that I've spent so much time in and really discuss it in detail with someone who's receptive to ideas and then had really good ideas.
It's so important, I think, to have somebody that you can work with.
Yes.
I think it just writing and then just publishing, then you think you're the greatest writer in the world, only to find out, it's too long or it doesn't fit together or whatever the problems are with it. Okay. Sentence structure is too complex, all kinds of issues you can have thinking, well, I'm great. And then, but it's not, that's great. You got it on. So what you published a journal, you didn't publish a novel, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. All right.
It's
So
a very easy self-publishing trap.
It is.
I'm really good. I don't need an editor. I'm just going to, subject the populace to this.
My editor said to me, he said, everybody thinks they're a great writer.
Yeah.
I never forgot that. He's been good for me. So tell me, you told me why you decided that the story needed to center on a hike. Okay. And that was because you did the Appalachian Trail. So I just want to investigate that a little bit and go down that trail a little bit. No pun intended here. So why did you do the AT? You graduated from Clemson. Why the AT? I mean, there's, why didn't you just go to law school?
That's a fair question. The Appalachian Trail had been sort of on my radar. I'd read Bill Bryson's book at some point in the past. My brother-in-law had hiked it.
He only hiked about 200 yards, enough to do the book, right? Whatever.
Yeah. I love that book, but it's not the story of a through hike, which hikers sort of resent.
I read that book too. Yeah, he's funny. It was great.
Yeah. The Appalachian Trail had sort of been on my radar from that, and then from my brother-in-law having hiked it. I was just when I got to the end of Clemson, I just felt like I had missed opportunities to go out and have an adventure, and I could sort of see that those years were sort of tying up where you weren't in the middle of a career or having responsibilities. So I took that year off. I went to Nicaragua for 3 months with David.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Went to Guatemala for a month on my own. And then just the timing worked out where, you usually start hiking in March or April. And it was December, and I had some time before I started law school in August. And well, this fits. And it's an hour and a half from home. My parents can drop me off. They can pick me up if it doesn't go well. And so it made a lot of sense. It was very inexpensive.
So what really got you going on the AT is you had an interest in it. That's what I'm hearing first. Okay. There was some reinforcement because your uncle did it. And then you got Bill Bryce, you did a little reading on it. But what was missing in your life is you felt like this was like your last chance for freedom.
Yeah. It was sort of an over-dramatic quarter-life crisis. But
So
yielded
you
good
even
results.
coming out of college, you started feeling almost like you were a prisoner of sort of life.
A little bit. I think that's a way, sort of, that's something that ended up in the book. It's just that feeling of being on a conveyor belt. Like, this is what's expected for you. This is where you'll go. Um,
That's Music
be
Man.
on your way.
Wasn't that
So,
Music Man?
Music Man and Gabe to an extent, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. But so then why law school? What was your undergrad?
I was a history major.
Okay, so then why law school?
I just that's another good question. I
When you
didn't
say
have a
it's
clear
another
set
good
path.
question, that means like you don't have an answer, you haven't thought about it, but you thought about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I have my days where I think highly of my decision to go to law school, and I have my days where I think I just sort of fell into the trap of testing well, reading well, not having a clear set path, and just sort of like, okay, well, I'll just go to law school. Yeah, I can get into a good law school.
So did you find a lot of other kids at that age, young men and women, that had that exact same reason for being at law school?
Yes, yes,
Isn't that
and I was
terrible?
envious of the people that had sort of put their foot in the ground and picked a direction. Like, I'm going to law school to do this. I'm doing exactly this. And that's the path I'm taking. Hey, look at you. All right. Well, I'll take some
It's funny
classes.
when you say that. It reminds me of remember Dr. Lee next door to us.
Yes.
Okay, I was talking to him once about career, and he said I knew from when I was 10 years old I was going to be a doctor. And I said, you have no idea how settling that is for someone's life because you've had it the whole time.
Yeah, it must be nice.
It must be nice. I'm with you. There you go. But what's interesting is you knew in 10th grade. I mean, in 4th grade at 10 years old. It just isn't one of those occupations that people respect in the world. Like if you said when you were in college, I'm going to be a writer. How many people in your family would have said, come on, man, get a real job. You want to write at night, right?
Yeah.
That's where
I,
we come from. We don't
yeah.
respect in our society the creative side, even though you're willing to make the sacrifices to live that life.
Yeah. And I think that it's been a benefit to my writing, I hope, that I've been an attorney, went to law school. Law school is an excellent place to learn how to write and learn how to make your point very quickly. So that just having life experience and not coming out of college and then going to an MFA program right away and being a writer or trying to be a writer. I think having some life experience has sort of helped color the characters in my novel. I mean, I think there's a couple attorneys in it, so
There's something. There is. Yeah, I know. I saw you put that in there. But it is something that there's something that we always say about God in our story, and that God will use every single bit of your story. Okay, you will use in all your right every single bit of your story. It's just and it certainly did come out. In fact, I was surprised in your book. I mean, how insightful you are and how thoughtful you are, about people. That was such like, my God, this is Brian Livingston. This is pretty cool. I didn't see him I don't see you as an adult. You're still that 10-year-old with the Mustang shirt on. Okay. So
I think we have a similar perspective on me. I don't see myself as an adult either. Which,
well, I want to tell you, your wife sees you as an adult, so you need to be one. All right.
yeah.
But the other is that, completing, you started the AT, you said, I can get dropped off and my parents could pick me up. But that's not how you operate. That's not the Brian that I know. I mean, so how did, go back to being in high school wrestling? That's one of the more awful sports to become a part of. Okay. Yeah. What happened when you were in high school? How did that high school wrestling reinforce who you are, your character that God put in you, if you will?
Oh man, I shudder to think what would have become of me without Coach Jim Glasser of Love It Wrestling. That was it was a really good experience because I have a very strong personality in my coach, and coach is just pushing me. On my own, I have a really bad tendency to avoid opportunities for failure, and then especially public failure. So, going out in a very tight singlet and wrestling someone in front of a crowd is a very good opportunity for public failure. But to have,
and you're telling me you tried to, when you were growing up, you always tried to avoid that.
yes.
Okay. So now you were thrust. Why did you allow yourself to be thrust into that? There's plenty of team sports,
I kind of had an inkling that it would be something that suited, at least the actual on the mat aspect of it, suited my strengths in terms of just, short and low to the ground and very, very strong.
Yeah.
And then, honestly, Coach Glasser popped out from behind a vending machine one day and grabbed me, put me in a headlock when I was in 7th grade. Said, "You're coming to the wrestling practice in 2 weeks." So I guess
he recruited you?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, great.
It was already my plan, but that really cemented it. And then, especially those early middle school years, I was good at it. It's a hard practice. You work hard, you get out there, you're expected to succeed, and you're given all the tools to succeed. And then when I was succeeding, it felt really nice. And that was sort of how I built my identity in high school. And then just to have Coach Glasser and some of the other coaches believe in me and expect more of me than I would have ever expected from myself, and push me to do things that I never would have thought possible. There's such a big building block of my self-esteem to be able to look back, not just, the medals and the accomplishments, just making it through a season is very tough. And just knowing what I'm capable of gave me a lot of confidence that, sort of a timid guy like I am, would not have built up on his own. So you take that to the courtroom, take that to the Appalachian Trail, take that to writing. Just know that I'm at minimum willing and able to put in the work, and then get somewhere, get to a goal, even though that goal is distant on the horizon.
So you were willing. What got you to be willing to put in the work was first. I mean, he thought you could do something great. I'm talking 7th grade. And then you started to see results yourself. And
Yes.
And from there, continued encouragement from him and the other coaches, plus the results, had you just continued to push.
Yes. I had to be shown what I was capable of. And they did that.
When did you come to believe that you were potentially a state champion?
It's probably middle high school was the first time I had that real thought. I mean, obviously in middle school, you sort of, when you're doing well, you're like, oh, this could translate to me being on the pictures on the wall with the other state champions. And then, middle high school, you see that as a real path. But it's almost like a double-sided brain, double-think situation, because I'm nervous and terrified before every match, thinking there's no way I can do this. And then, if they put up a bracket for whatever tournament you're in that weekend, so I have to win 5 matches. That's 5 coin flips. There's no real saying that I'm going to do it. You can really get in your head. So there are thoughts to both ways.
But did you have thoughts when you walked onto the mat thinking, I can't do this? Or did something click for you?
There was a click moment. Once on the mat, I had my little routine that I went through that I was very rigid on, because I had to move from off mat Brian to 160-pound wrestler Brian.
Okay.
So I had that routine, and then my parents would comment on it. Just the look would change and the overall movements would change. Get serious and almost get in character.
It's sort of the equivalent of the boxer stare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some very mild theatrics.
But it was doing what it was. It wasn't meant so much for your opponent, but for you to get you set for it.
Yes. And then, once the match starts and you sort of get a feel for the guy, it's like, okay, all right, I think this one's going to go my way. And, hopefully. And
so when you were when you had those 5 matches, as you looked up at the board and see who you're going to be wrestling for those 5 matches that would lead to the state championship, you're talking about 5 people who are all potential state champions, right?
Yes.
How did that? I always wondered. I've never been to that sort of level in any kind of competitions. Okay, you were there. What is that like when you're looking at? You're looking at the 5 best people, 5 best guys. How do you get yourself around that? I mean, how do you say I deserve to be here?
I don't know that I ever actually told myself that in a way that I believed until I was actually on the mat wrestling these guys. I think I benefited from the fact that I got so terrified before every match that it was hard to escalate that terror when you escalated the scale. So, I'm just as terrified before the semifinal or the finals match as I was before that Tuesday match, 3 weeks ago. So, it kind of just made it another day for me. I do remember they did the semifinals one night, like maybe a Friday night, and then the finals didn't start until 7 p.m. that Saturday, which I thought was particularly cruel. It's a long time to sit and think about it. And that started to get to me, just being in that arena for that long, just walking around, pacing. And then,
oh my gosh, that would be something, yeah.
But I had a good system that day. I would go up and talk to my coach about how nervous I was. And he would yell at me, he's like, "This is ridiculous. It's just another match. Go sit down." And for whatever reason, that worked. And that would help me for a while. Just, him being that same level of grouchy to me. Even
he knew you. He knew how to talk to you, too. I mean, he was with you for a long time. One thing that you learn there, which is very clear to me, is it's one match at a time. Now, I might throw up before each match, okay, because I'm so nervous, but it's one match at a time, right? Yep. And I just have to do this right now. Tell me how you took that into the AT.
Very directly, because if you tackle that whole my year, they change the distance of the AT every year.
What is the distance of the AT?
Yeah, they add switchbacks and stuff. But if you tackle that
what is the distance of the AT?
2,185.9 miles as of 2015. I think it's crept up closer to 2,200 now.
Okay.
You can't do anything about that in a day or in a month, so you have to break it down into more bite-sized chunks. And so my routine was 2-hour bits. I'm gonna wake up in the morning. I'm gonna do my routine. I'm gonna hike for 2 hours. That's all I'm gonna worry about. And at 2 hours, I'm either gonna take a break, sit down, and eat a bar or do something, or I'm gonna eat a bar while I'm hiking. But the idea is 2 hours. And then once I get to that 2-hour break, I start worrying about lunch, which will be about 2 hours from there. And then 2 hours after lunch, another break, and then 2 hours, and then you're starting to think about making camp somewhere. So just breaking the day down even into small bits. And did
you ever think in terms other than 2 hours? Did you ever think, so my 2 hours gets me through the day? Did you ever allow yourself to think about the next day or, the rest of the week?
Yeah, you have to an extent, because you want to know when you're getting into town, and you want to, if I stay at, Hawk Mountain Shelter tonight, that means that I have 18 miles to the next shelter. You want to know what you're leaving yourself the next day. If I don't make it to Hawk Mountain, that means that I have 27 miles to the next shelter. I don't really want to do that. So I have to, you plan your week. And then, if I do so many miles every day, the next 3 days, then I only have 4 miles to get into town and resupply. And, the backdrop of that is how much food do you have? When do you need to resupply? What the weather is.
So there is a planning aspect to it, but then even with planning, you would back it down to, we're down to 2 hours again.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. I do have a friend that was, he was in a Bible study with me, and he's about my age, maybe a little older, but he was a Navy SEAL. And as a Navy SEAL, you look at him and you say, this guy's like 5'7". I bet you weighs $135. Okay. Maybe $130. And how is it that he could be a Navy SEAL? Because you always picture guys that look like you, that are just strapping and all that. And, he says, yeah, all those guys, they didn't make it. And I said, why did you make it? He says, I don't understand. He says, there's two things you need to do. Just do what you're doing now and don't think ahead. Because if you think ahead, it'll defeat you. So 2,200 miles is a defeatist thought. Okay. 2 hours is something I can handle. Right. Yeah. And the second thing is he says, you just don't stop. That was his thing. You just don't stop. And I'm like, that's it? He goes, yeah, that's how you become a Navy SEAL. I was like, wow. And I always thought of you when he would tell those stories.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. I don't think I could phrase anybody. Just, am I going to quit? Not today. Am I tired and do my legs hurt? Yes, but I do need to keep hiking. But then, the backdrop to that would be knowing, if you're like when we discussed stepping out of career, when it is indeed time. I don't know if I have any good rhetoric to explain that, Mark. But I remember I was about a week from finishing the AT. And I just had one of those days where I thought about the entire week, and I sat down on a rock, and I didn't cry, I don't think, but I came pretty close. I can't do this for another week. Hike every day for a week. And I'd come all that way. I'd hiked for 4.5 months at that point, but I just stretched my vision a little too far to start thinking about that final week instead of just my 2-hour bites. And so
you lost your discipline.
Yeah.
Chunking up the day. And when you lost your discipline, you lost your will and your confidence.
Yep.
How about that?
Just keeping your
time. What was the best day on the hike?
The best day. I'd say all the days in the White Mountains were pretty much a tie. Getting late in that hike and doing those big mountains, it's a really gorgeous part of the world, with really great views and really nice people, and you feel accomplished because you made it there. Those day-to-day mountains are really tough, so it gives you that sense of accomplishment that you're kind of looking for each day. And then you get the views, and you get
where are the White Mountains?
In New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
But pretty close to the end. The Katahdin's starting to be even on your shorter agendas. Those are really good days. And I remember being happy for the entirety of these days because it is fun to be challenged. That's why you're out there climbing those hard mountains.
How many days was that?
It was just 7, maybe 6.
6-7 days. Then tell me, what was the day that just about brought you down?
I would say the entire state of Connecticut. We got to... The trail's only in Connecticut for about 48 miles, I think, but we got there in late June, and it had been really wet up to that point, and then it got really hot.
Yeah.
And the mosquitoes just bloomed. I've never experienced anything like it. Just constantly buzzing around you, biting you through your shirt. I would cook dinner inside my tent with my hands poking out like I was, making a nuclear bomb or something. And it's when I started listening to music, so I didn't have to hear the mosquitoes buzzing the entire time.
Yeah.
Man,
how did you make it through that?
Was
your 2 hours enough for you, or was that not even enough at some point?
Yeah, break it down as small as possible. I was lucky. My sister Grace lived in Albany at the time, so she came and picked me and my buddy up. So we sort of split up Connecticut. I don't know that I would have made it through. But then just where it is on the trail, it's like 1,500 miles in. So you're a long way. You've been out there a long time, but you still have over a month. So it's one of those moments where you really start, what am I doing out here? Where I don't want to be hot and sweaty and mosquito bitten for the next month. I've already come all this way. What am I really doing here? What am I accomplishing? And a lot of people did start quitting around that time, which was surprising, just considering how long they'd already been out there. So
that also works on your head.
Yeah, there was
because then it makes it kind of okay, right? Because they're leaving, why can't you leave?
Yeah, and then you're looking at these guys, and you think they're made of iron because they've already made it so far, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and it's just whoa, man. That was the first time and the only time that actual quitting, was a real possibility.
Well, how did you get to the other side of it, though? How did you get through that? Because there's a deep learning in that. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is it?
Just didn't stop. It's like your friend said, just, Connecticut's short, just make it through. Another aspect of it, there's no mountains really in Connecticut. You're just rolling over hills. So you're still getting tired going up and down, but there's no accomplishment feeling. Just told myself.
How many days is 48 hours? 48 miles.
I think we probably 3 nights and 2 full days of hiking in Connecticut. So not long at all, but it was awful. It was
24 hours a day, mosquitoes, like a blanket of mosquitoes, 24 hours a day.
Yeah. If I laid in my tent, I would have to lay perfectly flat and they would line up on the mesh, the breathing mesh. And if I rolled against the side of the tent, they would bite me. Never experienced anything like it.
Oh my God. That sounds awful. So it's interesting that you don't say that the best day was when you made it to the end.
Yeah, that was bittersweet. I think we finished by like 9 a.m. that morning. David came up and saw me, and by the time I saw him, I'd already finished. That was really
climactic almost, huh?
Yeah, we finished in August, but it was cold and dreary. There's a cloud around Mount Katahdin, the final mountain. So there wasn't a view. We got up there, we drank a little champagne, which you're not supposed to do anymore up there. And then we just sort of hiked down.
And that's it.
You come back down the way that you came. So you finish and then you're not done hiking for the day.
Yeah, but the other part of this thing is that the hike is done. And so there isn't any tomorrow.
Yeah.
You've been doing this for months. How long did it take you to do it?
144 days.
Okay, so on the 145th day, you didn't have anywhere to hike.
Yeah. And one of the best parts of being on the trail is it's so long and you're in the meat of it for so long that it really does feel like the entire world for a while. And it feels like all your responsibilities are I'm just going to wake up, I'm going to go north today. And it's extremely relaxing. And it provides a whole new sort of meditative level to it. Just being so deep in the middle of it, not being able to see the beginning or the end for a while. And then all of a sudden you're at the end. Well, what do I think about? Funny. What do I do with my hands?
It's interesting. I was doing some research on morning routines. And one of the things that they said is that, decisions, the reason for morning routine, one of the reasons is so when you get up, you don't have to make decisions because decisions are stressful. Well, if you're on the trail, there really aren't, like you said, what's the decision? Go north, right? And follow the trail. When you get up on the 145th day, there are all kinds of options, which means there's all kinds of decisions that have to be made. So the stress of life sort of moves in on you.
Yep.
How about that? There's a quote from the book I have for you that says, the trail is supposed to be about self-assessment and breaking habits. You wrote that. How did that work for you?
For me, I'm sort of relying on other people on that because I would just finished college, and I don't know that I really had the day-to-day routines yet. But it's the trails and all these long hikes are such a good opportunity to pare it all down to the basics. get out of whatever routine or rut that you may be in. And, if you re-enter, restructure your life. For me, since I snuck it in between two different schoolings, periods of education, I don't know that I experienced that as directly, although I realized that served that purpose, which probably helped me in my past couple months and the decisions I've made. But yeah, figuring out what you're about, what you like to do, what you want to do, and then what you have to do to be able to do those things.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you didn't. It seemed like to me like because you had law school planned, you never really figured it out. In other words, it was a time to put all of that heavy thinking on the shelf. But then soon as the 145th day, you were just like right in the middle of it, like you were on day, 0 - 1.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very accurate.
That's an awful feeling. So but at least you did it. So let me talk about the book for a bit.
Okay.
All right. First, I want to make some comments about the book. When you sent me the book, okay, and the book is, again, The Habits of Squirrels by Brian Livingston. Here we go. It's available everywhere. I can't wait for the Audible book. It's going to be great. But when I picked it up, I realized first off that it wasn't nonfiction. It was fiction. Correct. And that was disappointing to me. And it was like I wanted to read first person. I really wanted to know about this kid that was in my basement all the time called Brian Livingston. I wanted to know what he thought and how he saw the world and how he experienced things and how he grew. And I felt like when I picked up the book, I said, this is like stolen from me. My expectations been dashed, right? Now I have this fiction. So then my next thought was, oh, he wrote in fiction because he doesn't want to be transparent. He doesn't want to share any of that. So he's going to create these fictionalized character and this fictionalized story, and then he can still hide. And then I started reading, then I made a commitment. So I read the book, and then I saw I was wrong, that a lot of that did come out. And then I do know,
That's good to hear.
Well, there's a lot about Brian in that book, knowing Brian. And I can see when in your writing, the things that you were struggling through in your life at the time that you were writing, that was interesting to me because it came across personally. Okay. So I think you did a really good job with the story. And I was particularly impressed and surprised, okay, that you were so transparent about everything.
Thank you.
But some of the questions I had were just about the book first, and then I'm going to get into some of these characters. So okay. What did you do right? Like you said, you sat down, you decided to do this, 2018, you had the date. What was it? When was it?
January 2018.
January 20th, 2018. You did it. Came back from the hike and started writing. And you finished the book when?
Pretty much 2 years later, the first draft went out to my folks. And then I finished it late last year in terms of what you just held up for the screen.
Almost three years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost 4, really. Almost
4 years. Okay. Yeah. That's a big project, man. Every night,
yes.
Every day, morning, every night, going through it. You're just incredible. But when you look back on that 4 years with that book, what did you do right, and what could you have done differently?
What I did right was I made an effort to do it professionally. I went back, in my free time, I was listening to writing podcasts about the structure of novels and just, how stories are told. And I got books on grammar and style. As I was writing, I was reading those and implementing what I learned from that. Listening to a lot of just YouTube interviews or anything I could get from people, not even just authors, just creative people that I looked up to, and anything I could get from them about their craft and how they viewed what they were doing. I pulled from that, and I tried to incorporate that and tried to think about my work the way they thought about their work.
Yeah. And so that's what you feel you did right.
Yes.
And what could you have done differently?
I could have made it a much more efficient process, I think. After I went through and I did my first draft, and I'll say I got to like 75,000 words. And, it was essentially, it just sort of ended. And then there wasn't that ebb and flow that I wanted. So I went back, and one of those books that I had read was called The Story Grid. And it was about sort of chunking down your novel into
what's it called?
The story grid.
The story grid. Okay.
Chunking down your novel into, I thought of them as little cubes, but just scenes with, I think the 5 tenets of a scene. And I went through each scene and I tracked those, and I just made sure it had all the moments of a scene and that it was necessary to the overall story. And then I would take those cubes and just sort of move them around to make them each sort of act. I think you got to think of different little acts in the novel. Each act ebb and flow, reach a climax and resolve, and then most importantly, be ready, make the novel ready to move on to the next act.
So then you say I could have been, but you started this by saying I could have been more efficient.
Yes.
What does that mean?
If I was going to be more efficient, I could, as a more experienced writer now, I could have, I probably could go ahead and write those scenes more impactfully on the first go round and better place them in the novel. So I don't have to do, I think it was 2 or 3 months of just rereading and breaking down and doing spreadsheets and then moving it back around to put it into its sort of most narratively pleasing format. Yeah. And then I would, as I'm going through the marketing and publicizing process now, I wouldn't have kept it a secret. I would have sort of, gone ahead and gotten my Instagram going and done all that stuff that I needed to do to sort of build a base.
Yeah, and so the reason maybe you didn't do all those things is because, one, I'm not an author. I can't be very good. All this self-talk, right? This is the off the mat. This is the off the mat, walking around the gym, waiting for my off the mat, which was all negative. Yeah. And if I do tell everybody I'm going to have a novel and then I don't, then I'm a failure. And if I do tell everybody I'm going to have a novel and I do, and it's terrible, I'm a failure. This is all that's going on with you.
Yeah. And the stakes are high because, a novel is so personal if it's any good. There's so much of you on the page to put it out there, and then people are like, I see that you're illiterate and have no feelings, would be really, really crushing.
No, it's interesting. I have a friend from years and years ago. Okay. I haven't seen her probably in 20 years, at least. And her name was Chris Coleman. And she wrote a nonfiction book. She was a businesswoman here in town and a business leader. She's great, smart, wrote a book called Green Bananas. Okay. And it was on establishing brand in your product and all. And she did a great job. But I remember having lunch with her once, and I said, what do you want to do more than anything else? And she said, I want to write a novel. And I said, well, why don't you do it? She said, I don't want to do it because I would have to expose myself, and I'm not willing to do that. And she never wrote a novel, ever. She was just going to, but you're saying that you had to expose yourself.
Oh, yeah. It was a very real conversation that I had with myself. Just sitting there like, okay, if I'm going to do this, then, there has to be some of Brian in it. You'd have to put yourself on the page. Otherwise, there's no reason to it. It doesn't add anything.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Brian. So you said, I loved it the way you qualified that. There has to be some of Brian on the page. Okay. How much of Brian was left out of this book?
A good portion. A good portion.
Why?
I don't know that I'd like put up barriers or anything you try not to insert yourself for the sake of inserting yourself. Every character is some sort of derivative of me, so they'll show certain things, and then it's all sort of in service to the story. But if you have stuff that's just you, I would say the most glaring examples I can think of is where I tried to be funny and went back through on a second reading, and it was just me trying to insert one of my jokes in there and show the world how funny I am. But just other.
But is there something that you actually didn't put in that you thought, oh, I'm going to insert this in a character, but I don't want people to know that about me?
Now that stuff I made an effort to leave in. If it's worked in the novel and it worked in the scene and it seemed like something a character would say, I tried to leave it in, no matter how nervous it made me to put that out there.
So you didn't withhold.
Yeah, not on that front. If it was in service to the story.
Well, I understand. I mean, you can't just throw everything on the page, but I'm talking about if it's in service to the story, because it is a novel.
Yeah.
Okay. And if it's in service to the character, right? But you didn't have a point where you said, I really should put this in, but I am not going to write about that.
Correct. Yeah.
That's pretty brave, man. That's courageous.
Yeah. That causes some sleepless nights, especially, in these early stages where, it's the first go round, and
so tell me about these characters and how they sort of they're pieces of you. Like Claire, there's the wife of old Gabe, and it says she's I characterize her the woman who loves you for who you are.
Yeah, she's probably sort of a conglomerate of the women in my life. I mean, I think of Claire as so smart and so reasonable, and just like initially bemused at Gabe as he kind of goes through his masculine ramblings and concerns and midlife crises, and then accepting, and then probably at the right points impatient. I really enjoyed writing her. It's terrifying to write. I don't have any insight into older women specifically.
That's what was surprising to me. So these are relationships you've had with your mom and your aunts probably, and your sisters, right? And all that. It all came out in Claire.
Yep.
What about Jezebel, the teacher?
She,
I call her the teacher. She's not a teacher. I realize that, but she was like, she gave you this, the trail, the inside scoop on the trail on how to survive, right? I mean, that.
Yeah. The mentor. She,
the mentor, that's better. Yeah. Okay.
Just, she started off, just women that I met or girls that I met, depending on, I guess, their age, hiking on the trail, just like the headstrong, independent women that were out there doing that really impressive thing, in a society that really kind of does everything it can to make women nervous to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Then you spend 3 or 4 years with her and you get to know her, as an individual. So she takes on sort of her own life. So
did you say spend 3 or 4 years with her?
Yeah. Writing the character, writing the novel.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I was going to say. And so then what about Billy? He's the son, but he's like your reminder of what you could have been.
Yeah. Billy only gets a couple of scenes, but Billy, he to me, he's similar to those guys I talked about in law school that had picked their direction, knew what they wanted to do, and they were going there. And they had an idea, like Dr. Lee, for their entire life of what they're going to do. And then, I thought that contrasted well with Gabe, who just does everything he can to not take accountability for the decisions that he makes sometimes.
And Gabe, for people, it was a retired mailman, Okay. Lifelong postal worker, retired on pension. Okay.
Yes. So I thought
But
that they
his
were
son, Billy, turns out to be this 68th floor, big law firm heavy hitter.
yep, in a big
Right?
city far away.
In a big
And
city
so,
far away.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but he came from the characters that were really that you knew from law school, that they got on the track and they graduated high in their class. They went to the big law firm. They did well. And by now they're partners, kind of a thing. Right.
yeah. And in earlier drafts, Billy was sort of out and out nasty just throughout the book. And then as
He
you,
got pretty nasty with his father there for a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Well, Gabe may have had it coming, but
Spoken like a son and not a father.
yeah,
Remember, your turn's coming.
that's true. That's true. And then, what was I gonna say? Just that's a good source of resentment because Gabe never made the moves that Billy made, and now he sort of sees that those are all options. And then in earlier drafts, Billy was out and out nasty, but as you go through it and spend more time with the characters, and it's more interesting if
Billy's know how to put father son together. How did all that interaction work? You're not a father. Okay. You are a son.
Yep. But it's not drawn from my experiences with my dad. I think my dad would support, most of Billy's moves. My dad's been supportive of everything I've done.
Yeah.
So it's just that was another really tough aspect of this novel, where it felt like sort of looking out into the abyss, and then you sort of had to break it down and sort of engineer it.
So I'm writing about something I really don't know firsthand, right? I mean, that's
that's
how I picture sort of these relationships working.
Yeah. So just in the earlier drafts, it was kind of cartoony. The characters were kind of big and broad and flat. And then as you get to more time, you sort of really hone in on what the conflict is.
That makes sense. What about Music Man? I called him the emptiness of chasing the world.
That's pretty much it. And that's Music Man, and his thoughts on life are not infrequent in attorneys who have spent their life billing 2,300 hours a year and doing all that. And then going on the trail, you meet a lot of people at that stage of their life, and where they'll say things like, if I had known how little it took for me to be happy, I wouldn't have wasted so much time, accruing so much. I think Music Man might be a case of a guy who found that out. I mean, just barely too late.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but I love what you do at the end with Music Man. I thought that was great.
Thank you.
That was great the way you handled that. That was that'll be memorable for me. So these stories that you told, the plot line that you kind of followed with these characters, were they all AT experiences, or were some of them actually just made up?
It's a hodgepodge. A lot of them are maybe exaggerations or embellishments of AT experiences, and then just sort of the odd musings of a guy who spends too much time in his own mind, sort of wondering, like, what if instead of this happening, or what if they didn't say this? What if I had said this? Which is a fun playground for writing fiction, just exploring different ideas and seeing what sort of sticks. The AT colored everything, really. Just having all of that experiences of knowing the day-to-day hikes and all that, the day-to-day routines, and just sort of the people that you meet.
All right. So it's that experience that gives the richness to the story.
Yeah.
Why did you choose? I forgot to ask you this after this long intro I did about the book and slobbered all over you about how great it is. Why did you choose fiction versus nonfiction?
There's a lot of memoirs out there about hiking, about through hiking, or attempted through hikes.
The Bill Bryce one, right? I mean,
Yeah. And then the Cheryl Strayed one, Wild, which is excellent.
I read that. Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah.
She did a great job with that.
Yeah. So I guess sort of preliminarily, I'm not sure if I had anything to add to that. I wasn't confident enough in my own story to carry the weight of 350 pages. And then, I wanted to write a novel. I wanted to, play around, come up with characters, really work on telling that kind of story. And, it saves me from having to go back to all the people I hiked with. But you okay if I mention you in my novel? Are you okay if you portray, or my memoir, if you're portrayed as such and such? And that just, gave me sort of a blank slate to do exactly what I wanted to do and explore some ideas a little more in depth. And on top of that, there's a big risk when you're writing a hiking memoir of it just being a hiking journal. It's like, today I hiked from here to here. It was hard. Today I hiked from here to here.
No. It can't be that. No, it can't be. One of the things that really showed me the richness is that you came to the conclusion that, you can't, you're the kind of guy that I could picture who would want to hike by himself.
Yes.
Okay. Yet the book really shows the loneliness of the hike by myself and the emptiness in the story. It's boring because it does turn into, I hiked from here to here. The richness is in the conversation and then the growing between the characters and learning about their lives. Okay. You must have experienced that on the trail.
Absolutely. I mean, all my memories from the trail are memories that I had with other people.
There you go.
Experiences. That was a tough part about writing was that first portion where he is alone and it's cold. You got to make that long enough so the reader feels it, and then short enough so they don't just feel it too much and put the book down and move on to something more interesting. So there's a hard measurement to hit that point, get him to that sort of low point, and then have him meet Jezebel and kick off.
What comes first, the character or the plot line?
Oh man, everything changed so many times in terms of where I thought this novel was going to go. When I started writing, what I ended up deleting was it was still first person, but it was from a young man about my age hiking with that group
Makes
of boys.
Total sense to me now. Okay, good. I'm glad you started that way. All right.
Yeah. And then, so I got, maybe 20,000, 25,000 words into that. And I realized what I was doing is I was just kind of being a coward and had a stand in for me when I didn't have, the gumption to write my own memoir and use my own name. So I pulled back from that. I hit the delete key after some agony and restructured to write about it from Mr. Gabe's perspective, when initially he was just going to be a character that they come across.
Mr. Dave?
Mr. Gabe.
Mr. Gabe. Yeah. Okay. And so then Gabe came, and as he was moving, then these other characters, as the story with Gabe went, where he's getting dropped off and all that at the AT, but you introduced Billy early, you get into some other character. Did those characters come up as the story progressed?
A lot of the characters were already sort of up here. I know it's
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And sort then
thinking about I'm writing The Wizard of Oz, right? You got to have all of the characters lined up. You say, well, how do I weave this together?
Yeah, and some of them, in earlier drafts, they met Gabe much earlier, and then I realized it didn't work there, and you got to pull them out. And then there are characters who didn't make the final page. It's such a rat's nest trying to untangle what would have come first. Mongrel played more of a role. I think became an active character in earlier drafts, and I realized that, at least to me, didn't really work.
So he's the sage, right?
Yeah.
Was there a guy on the trail like that?
There was a person who inspired Mongrel, but the final product is irreconcilable.
So all of those sayings that you have, that Mongrel poems, as Gabe called them, that Mongrel wrote, those are yours?
Yeah, that's all me.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's nobody on the trail sort of leaving limericks like that.
Well, I have some questions on some things that you wrote. Okay, Gabe said, I always thought I would finish my own thought without interruption. And then I got a job, and then I got married, and then we had Billy, our son, and he never stopped talking. Tell me about that. I always thought I would finish my own thought without interruption. That sounds like that was you, baby.
Yeah. I think it's probably easy to make the jump from the page to seeing why the person who wrote that ended up quitting their job.
I love it. That's great, Brian.
It's like we discussed earlier. Like growing up, I thought, I'm going to take this world by storm. Everything's going to go great. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. All the jobs are going to say yes. And then, you get out of law school, and it's like, okay, well, I need to take this job. This will be good experience. And then I need the money, so I need to keep doing this. All these practical concerns. I haven't gotten to the children phase yet, but just other things weigh on your decisions that you don't anticipate when you're a child, and so you can probably debate to the extent that Gabe didn't make his own decisions and let all these things lead him, but it's just that feeling. I started having that feeling, and
that feeling being like you never really were heard, that you were never able to talk out your thoughts.
Yeah. Like, is there have I manifested myself in any sort of pure, sincere way on this world, or is there the me that I think that I am, that I want to be, and then the insurance defense attorney who spends 8 hours, 10 hours a day?
I once had a friend, as reinforcement, by the way, to what the decision you just made about your job is. I just had once a friend when I left corporate, and I was terribly insecure about it. But he said to me, if you want to know who you are, if you want to know what you want, you have to leave the organizations that tell you what you want.
That's good.
And so that's what we all kind of get into. You could have joined a law firm, and you're going to work it to death, but now look, what you want is to be a partner. And here, let me tell you how the next phase works, and what you're going to do, and what you're going to make, and how it's going to be, and the clients that you'll have, and you sit there, and it wears you out if it's not you.
Oh yeah, it's bleak.
So where did this come from? Here's another one that really just puzzled me. Knowing a little bit about you, okay, and as a kid, okay. It's a quote. It says, I always wondered what it would be like to have a child that wasn't ashamed of me.
That one.
That thing like flew off the page at me. And here you are. Go ahead. So tell me about that.
Luckily, that one's more from Mr. Gabe said that, right? After Gabe.
Gabe said that. Yeah. Talking about Billy. He feels that way, that Billy just didn't have time for him, right? I mean, that's what you did. He didn't have time, couldn't come out of the meeting, sends his old man home in a taxi, But, so he has this feeling. I always wondered what it'd be like to have a child who wasn't ashamed of me, because Gabe is ashamed of Gabe.
Yeah. He has a tendency to, I think, to project that on others. But luckily, that's something that mostly was a Gabe creation. I didn't have to draw on my own life so much to pull that. But you do have that thought of, I don't know what sparked this idea. Just like, what if the things that I do? What if I tell my kid that I'm doing such and such for a living, and he's like, oh, that's terrible.
What was the purpose of the book, for you? And then I'm going to ask you, what's the purpose of the book for the reader, for others, if you will?
Yeah. The purpose of writing a novel in the first place, just on its own, not bearing on the content, was just to have that feeling that I'd put my foot down and picked a direction for Brian Livingston, that I was going to do something that I wanted to do, and that I was going to, like it says in the book, finish a sentence. I was going to put down what I had to say on the page. Because, up till that point, I did sort of have that conveyor belt feel where, I'm letting other things influence me. And then as I started writing, every time Gabe grows or learns something or has an insecurity or a proud moment, I was on this journey with him, as I was writing. So, as he's learning about how he wants to take control of his life, I was learning how I wanted to take control of my life and how to really frame how I'd spent my other time.
I love that. And then what about for others? For the reader? What's the purpose for the reader? Well, there isn't a purpose for the reader. The reader's purpose will be accomplished through your purpose.
Yeah, hopefully they take a similar journey to what I took. Hopefully they pull out some of the quotes like you have, and they connect with them, and it gets them thinking about what they're doing and how they're spending their time and what they want to do, and then how their insecurities affect their relationships with other people, and then probably most importantly gets them outside and realizes the role that the outdoors can play in making those sort of decisions.
Well, all that quietness that you went through in your life, all that observation time certainly was a great recorder of people and who they are and how they interact and what motivates them.
Yes.
So you're wise beyond your years. I mean, it's pretty cool what you've created here.
Thank you.
I'm getting towards the end here. A question I have is, how did you go about choosing these impossible things that you have in your life? And I look at impossible things like, high school state wrestling champion, okay, the AT, and now the book. These are impossibilities, okay? They're impossibilities for what I'll call the normal person. The Brian Livingston who's sitting, in East Cobb, Georgia, going to a good school, expected to go to college, get a degree, get a job, and, have a family, do what everybody does, right?
Yep.
And I say, no, this guy's going to be different. He is going to be a state champion. He is going to hike he's going to do the through hike on the AT, and he is going to become what he thought about when he was 10 years old. This note from God almost that says, you're going to be an author, and he's going to write a novel. How do you select these things? How did this happen to you?
It's just the wrestling was nearly all luck. Jim Glasser came out and grabbed me and pulled me into this world of working hard towards long-term goals, and that I had parents who supported and were willing to put in the time that they have to put in for such a goal.
Okay.
And then after that, I was a wrestler in high school. I had that goal of building to that state championship. That's sort of how I defined myself, and that's always what I had on the horizon. You graduate, and all of a sudden, that's gone. And then during college, I think mentally I really struggled with not having something like that I didn't engage myself in a long-term project like that. And then afterwards, I made a concerted effort to find those types of projects, like the Appalachian Trail, just long-term things. After wrestling, I sort of had that sense of like, if time is all it takes, I can do it. If effort and not quitting is what it's about, I can do that. And then, so that's how you end up on the Appalachian Trail, doing that long hike. I did a marathon somewhere in there, which was another 4 or 5 month endeavor. And then the book is just, always had the feeling to do it and just wanted to do it, and then sat down and started doing it and just really never quit. It's sometimes how easy.
So I'm learning from you, as I learned from my Navy SEAL friend, is I need something that's going to take a long time, and it's going to take all of me.
Yes. Full engagement. Yeah.
And that's not what you had in college. And that's
Correct.
not what you had in law school. And it was not what you had in your career.
Correct. And it's a bleak, miserable place when you're not doing what you want to do.
But I think that's how you selected those three. I mean, these are like any one of these would be a highlight in someone's life. Any one of them. You have three of them. I'm encouraging you. You're incredible. And I think that your career going forward is going to be just mind-blowing for all of us that knew little Brian Mustang, as I called you, Livingston, okay?
Yep.
Mongrel said, it isn't about what you learned. It is about what you do with it. When he was talking to you at the end of the trail, as you were getting towards the end of it, was within spitting distance, okay? So what do you do with this? And I'm not saying it has to be what did you learn from the trail and how did you apply it? But what did you learn from this latest trail hike, which I'll call writing the novel? Okay. And how do you apply that?
It provides a good insight into the human mind. There's the practicalities of it, of just becoming a better writer and sort of structuring everything. I'm looking for the next thing to learn how to apply all of that, whether it's another novel or whether it's just a job or something that is a little more up my alley. Just trying to keep studying the human condition and analyzing it and putting it out in a useful way.
That's a great purpose. Repeat that.
I probably have to listen back. Keep studying the human condition and analyzing it, and then putting it out in a useful way.
Write that down. That is Brian Livingston's purpose.
Thank you. That's
Write that down. Okay. That's such a clear purpose. I love it. Thanks for telling me that. Thanks for you. You need to take that on. There's not many people that know their purpose. You know it. Now, one thing that disturbed me is you said, I don't know if it's a job and I don't know if it's what. No. What's your title? What do you do for a living?
This is going to be fun. I'm an author.
You're an author. So that's what you do. You study the human condition and you write it down so that it could be useful for others to live their lives. In effect.
I like that. I can live by that.
That's you. You said it, not me. I'm repeating it. Last question. In all of this, all of these experiences in your life, particularly the last one, did you ever encounter the supernatural?
I have seen a ghost.
It could be a ghost, but it also could be there's something that just happened. There was this encounter that was beyond the natural world that I kind of ran into that you called it this muse, okay, is the word that you kind of put to it. But that's more what I'm talking about, that I have seen a ghost. Well, tell me about you saw a ghost. What the heck? I mean, you brought it up.
So I'll answer your question in a more serious way afterwards. But after the thru hike, a group of us thru hikers did a reunion hike on the Long Trail in Vermont the next year. And the Long Trail can be hiked in the winter, so it has shelters with like sliding closed barn doors.
Yeah.
And so you can really seal it up. And we were staying there on a full moon night, and we had gotten to camp, eaten. We were all in the shelter. The door was closed. There's only one shaft of moonlight coming in through a little vent at the top. And I woke up in my sleeping bag and sort of felt something looking at me. And I rolled over, and there was a little girl's face in the moonlight looking back at me. And
face?
A face. And
okay.
Sort of the outline, but only what was in the moonlight was sort of given body. And I jumped back, and as much as the sleeping bag allows, and I hit the wall. And by the time I recollected myself, she was gone. And I lay there shaking for a couple hours because it's different. You feel something different than if it had been the end of a dream. And then in the morning,
that's pretty serious supernatural. Go ahead.
Yeah. And in the morning, went back and sort of Googled the shelter and Googled the area, and it was very well known for ghostly encounters, paranormal activities.
Wow.
But in terms of the muse, there are these wonderful moments when you're writing where it's like, our world comes up against another world, and you're just watching Gabe Jenkins interact with these people or to have these moments, and all you have to do is sit there and capture it. And so I can picture everything going on. I can hear what they're saying, and it's all just there. And it comes out in one beautiful, productive morning. And then when the muse isn't visiting, it's and
that feels like a positive, I'll put it that way, a positive supernatural event, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's like, did that really just come from me? Did that happen?
Yes.
Look how beautiful this is. Yeah. Well, this has been a very productive interview. I mean, it took us for a couple hours, but look what we got to your purpose, which is fantastic.
I'd say that's pretty efficient if it ends up in a purpose.
Well, one of the things I like is that what you said is I wrote this novel because it was an opportunity for me to finish my sentence.
Yeah.
That was, I thought that was a beautiful part of this too. So Brian, thank you very much for doing this with me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm hoping that you could use this to help promote your book. And the book is, just for everybody again that's still with us, is The Habits of Squirrels. And I recommend it highly. Brian Livingston, you do not have to be interested in hiking to read the book, but there's some wonderful characters, great development, and you'll find a little bit of yourself in every one of them, and probably some of your relatives. So, Brian, thanks for doing that. I'm just going to end and just say thank you to our audience. Thanks for joining me and Brian. And again, sign up at paparelli.com with your email. And also go to BrianLivingstonBooks.com.
Yep. And that
BrianLivingstonBooks.com. And
that's my tag on Instagram as well.
And it's the Instagram. Okay. Anything on Facebook?
Yep. Author Brian Livingston.
Brian Livingston on Facebook. Okay.
Author Brian Livingston. Yes.
Brian Livingston on Facebook. Okay. Well, I hope you sell millions and millions, and this gets translated into 50 different languages throughout the world.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I encourage you to keep writing. And thank you again. Please join us for the next interview. I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining Charlie Paparelli's show.